Hello, my name is Amira Armond. I am the founder of Kieri Solutions, which is an authorized C3 PAO, and I am very pleased to interview Jose Rojas and Ozzie Saeed, who participated in a joint surveillance assessment that our company did a few months ago. And I'm super excited to say that passed with flying colors. Met every requirement, got a 110 score, got the hat. Anyways, yeah. Jose, can I turn it over to you first to introduce your company and yourself?
Yes, my name is Jose Rojas. I am the CIO and one of the managing partners of TTC. We've been in the federal contracting space since 2005, and we mainly work with DoD customers and some civilian agencies as well. And I'm very happy that I met Ozzie a few years ago when we started the journey of the CMMC, and then I met you, Amira, and we successfully went through the assessment, and I guess everybody's happy at this point.
I imagine it was a little bit stressful on the way into the assessment.
It was, but actually it wasn't as much because I have known Ozzie for a long time, and he did a pre-assessment for us a couple of years ago, and so I knew I was in good hands. So
your company is TTC, Technology and Telecommunications Specialists, I think.
Technology and Telecommunications Consultants. I don't know what I was thinking when I came with that name, but we made it short just as TTC.
Very good. And Ozzie, would you introduce yourself and your role in that assessment?
Sure. Yeah, my name's Ozzie Saeed. I work for a company called Tiber Creek Consulting as the Director of Cyber Compliance Services, and also the founder of a product called IntelliGRC. And we helped Jose pretty much in the capacity of like an MSSP, vCISO consultant, not a traditional MSP with continuous like support and maintenance, like break fix, but mostly in regards to like gap assessment and preparation and readiness and remediations and things like that.
Excellent. So from my perspective as the C3 PAO doing the assessment, Jose reached out to us and said, I'm thinking about getting a CMMC level 2 assessment. Can you put us on your list? And then Jose introduced us to Ozzie and said, this is the person who we're working with to get ready, which we're great with. So my company loves it when we have the ability to work with the person who knows what's going on. And I'm bringing this up because it seems like there's a misunderstanding out there where companies think that they're not allowed to have outside parties help them, or that if they do get outside help, that they're not allowed to show it during the assessment. And from my perspective, that's absolutely incorrect. Get the most knowledgeable person in the room, have them right there supporting you. It doesn't matter if they're a W-2 employee of your company. If they're performing the work, have them there to support you. That's great. So, Jose, when did you start really paying attention to 800-171 compliance, and when did you start making major changes to get compliant?
I get at this point it's around 3 years ago. I had a friend working in our company. He was the CIO also, and we started having conversations about the NIST 800-171 and the CMMC certification. And at that point, we had all in-house domain servers and of course, we were not even remotely ready to pass any any assessment close to what needs to be done for the CMMC. So he recommended Gen Edge, that is a Virginia.
Just MVP.
Yeah. We started talking with them, and they sponsor us. They cover part of the cost, and that's how we got introduced to Tiber Creek at that point. They did an assessment on what we had, and well, before we started the assessment, we decided that having our own environment, our own domain, our own servers was not going to be, something easy for us to pass an assessment. So we decided to go in the Microsoft GCC High direction. We applied, we got accepted, and on the first round, Ozzie and his team, Tiber Creek, help us do I guess the first round of the configuration of what we had and the first SSP, and we left it at that. So I didn't focus anymore for like a year and a half on CMMC until I started hearing that it was actually advancing, and it was because with the government you never know how far they're going to get with a project before they finish or they just go our way. So, but when I started hearing that, this time, this is going to be sometimes going to be required, and we are, as I explained, a DoD company doing with DoD contracts. So it's something that we need to have in our portfolio. We're also ISO 27001, ISO 20000, CMMI level 3. When I saw you at the Summit 7 last year that we talked about, I asked you if you could add me to the list. What I was thinking is that when this becomes a requirement, everybody's going to be rushing, and who knows how long you have to wait to get an auditor to do the audit. So I talked to you, and I talked to Ozzie, and I talked to all providers as well. But at the end, Ozzie was the best option, and that's how we started. And I just want to put out there also that between the moment that I talked to you and Ozzie and the audit, it was like 6-7 months total time, and 3 months we spent negotiating with different providers to see who can help us. At the end, we selected Ozzie and his team, and from that point on, it took us 3 months to get ready. I have heard other companies talking about year to year and a half to get to that point, and we did it pretty quickly. So it helps that we were part of the GCC High environment, because that you inherit a lot of the controls from Microsoft and what they have done. But it is something that we were able to put together and get ready in about 3 months from the moment we start until we went through the audit.
If I remember, when you reached out and said we would like a joint surveillance assessment, you also said, what order am I on the list? We don't want to be the first one.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
And I said, don't worry, you're several companies down our list. You're not the first one. We've requested, no problem. And then you were the first one that was picked.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was funny because I didn't want to be the first one, because I didn't know what I was getting myself into, and but it went very well, I believe, and did have it's in my view of things, it was easy working with them. They let you perform the audit. They didn't really get in the way. And it was a good experience overall.
Yeah. So So let's start at the point when, we submitted you for joint surveillance, which meant that you knew that hopefully in a few months you'd get picked. And then when you actually got the notification, DIBCAC is coming. At that point, I imagine that Ozzie got to spend some extreme amounts of time reviewing everything and getting the evidence ready. Can you kind of talk about what that was like?
Yeah, well, I will let Ozzie talk about that because he is the one that really, he took the lead. I was mainly, supporting him and giving him what he needed, but he was the architect of all this. So I'll let Ozzie answer that question.
Sure. Yeah. So just to kind of recant the time. So we met Jose about 2 years ago through the Virginia MEP, and that was through a DoD OEA grant that was distributed by the national MEP. And so in the state of Virginia, we had already been supporting the state of Virginia's NIST MEP usage of the grant, which was essentially gap assessments for SMB DIB companies in the state of Virginia. And that's how we met Jose. And we engaged with him on that activity. And then I would say about 2 years later, that's when we were at CS2 DC. And I remember sitting like 6 rows back, and I see, Amira just did her presentation. She walks off the stage, and somebody in the front row runs up straight to her, and that was Jose. And I was like, wait, I know that guy. And so I was like, this is interesting. I wonder if he's asking her about the JSVA. And sure enough, and then I want to say, I think it was October, or I don't remember when CS2 DC was, but shortly about a month after that, that's when we heard from Jose, and he said, hey, getting ready to sign up for this thing. I want to get you guys back in to help us. Let me know what you guys can do for us, and we'll go from there. And so he had told us he had already at that point engaged with Kieri and you guys, and I guess submitted the paperwork to request the JSVA with DIBCAC, and then we negotiated, and I think Jose went and got some other quotes. We told him, go get your quotes from multiple vendors that you worked with, or here's some other vendors. I think we even recommended some. And then he pretty much came back and said, all right, I want to move forward with you guys. And so I would say in January, we pretty much first did some planning activities where it's just, let's look at where you are in terms of your infrastructure, your company, what you guys do, how you're using your infrastructure, what does the scope look like, how many employees, and who's in scope, who's not in scope. And then just come up with some plans on how we're going to try to make sure everything's tightened up and implemented, and there's enough evidence in place to support an assessment. And so we spent some time in January doing the planning, put together a task plan, project plan on how we think we should proceed. And then we didn't really re-engage until, I want to say, March. Then we got heads down, where we came in, and there was about 3.5 folks on my team, including myself. I say 3.5 because we had one additional part-time jump in here and there from my team, and then about 3 folks, mostly dedicated, which was a mixture of a cyber analyst who is very familiar with the CMMC model and documentation writing, and then we even had an engineer who had experience in implementing controls on technical requirements and on various types of information systems and tools and products. And so we just started kind of tackling that. I think the first step we did was, the concern of the constant gray area conversations around, is your MSP in scope? And we knew we would be identified, or the best approach would be to be identified as an MSP supporting the boundary in the organization. And so we said, how do we minimize our burden? And so this is something that we've done a few years back for all our clients that need hand holding or implementation and or remediation, anything that involves hands-on into their environment. We said, look, we're going to always ask the client to add us to their directory system, their domain, give us a laptop, their laptop, and just use their stuff. Like we don't, and require that they buy a, Office license and email and things like that and Teams. So that way we don't have to worry about anything coming on our side, keep it all clean on their side and help them get there. Right. And so that was the first thing we did is we asked Jose, let's get a laptop and let's get going. And that's what we did on the first, I want to say like the first week or second week of March. So yeah.
If I can jump in, what you just said is super key, and I hope everybody heard that. If you had said, I'm helping this company, but I'm using my own technology to manage their systems. Maybe we have network links that are open between the two companies, or we're using our own services to manage you. I would have actually been forced to not accept the assessment because at the time and still currently, we don't really have a way forward on assessing companies where there's multiple information systems involved in the assessment, where we don't just have to assess the company itself, but also their managed services provider. I think that will be fixed in the future, but it's very smart. I applaud your choice to basically have your personnel use the company's information system and use all that security, keep it all inside the company, rather than put part of the security burden on your own systems. That was a very good choice.
Yeah, I mean, scope creep, definitely want to avoid that. But even in our approach, right, you look at traditional MSPs, it makes sense to some degree where they have continuous monitoring tools, RMM tools, and whatnot. In our model of the services we provide, we don't do that, right? We won't stay. Our job is to help you get there, set up your infrastructure, train, knowledge transfer, and do it in a way that is scalable but sustainable by the client, right? Like we try to make sure that, hey, I'm just teaching you how to do this. Like we'll architect this whole thing for you. We'll make it happen. We'll get your input on it, but then we'll teach you how to maintain this, right? And then if you want an MSP, that's not us, but we can make some recommendations to some of the ones that we've got relationships with or we've vetted, et cetera. But it just always has been leaning towards, minimize the burden on the service provider from our perspective. And it's the same advice I give to OSCs, right? If you have contracts that are not necessarily product and more services, even if it's staff augmentation work, use the government GFEs, right? Use their systems, use their emails. Don't bring that to your corporate environment. Like try to keep it out of your scope.
Jose, for TTC, which by the way is a DoD contractor that provides IT support services, database management, development. For you guys, you mentioned you had already gotten ISO certifications and CMMI. How intense was the CMMC level 2 assessment compared to those other assessments?
It's different, but the preparation for the CMC was a lot more involved. With the ISO, it's pretty much you define how you're going to operate and you tell them how you're going to operate and you document that and you do it your own way, of course, following certain guidelines. But with the CMMC model, it's different because you have to implement the controls that are already defined. So you don't have that freedom of saying, I'm going to do this way or that. You have to really follow what needs to be done. It was a lot harder in my experience to get a CMMC than an ISO certification.
That's what I've heard as well. There's been some talk that an ISO 27001 cert is close, and it's just part of the way there. It's CMMC, I think, is the hardest cybersecurity certification out there, except for FedRAMP.
Also,
can you talk about?
something if that's okay about ISO. So that's been our experience as well, because we do support a variety of other frameworks and standards through other services offerings. And I've noticed the industry trend where, like, you look at something like SOC 2 or ISO that has a lot of flexibility. In fact, they have high level criteria and not necessarily like prescribed controls, right? And so you can squeeze in there very basic approaches, right? You can say whatever it is you think is necessary to meet that criteria. And so, like, and sometimes auditors won't even bat an eye, right? And you could say something as simple that's irrelevant to even security, right? Like, you could say, we have a checklist to turn the lights off in the office at night, and then where's your evidence? Here's a logbook saying I did it, right? And it's like that's acceptable there, right? And I've noticed that that's kind of been the commercial approach mostly in industry when trying to evaluate assurances from a provider, like a cloud service provider. But lately, I've been noticing that that's losing its respect. And I think it's because of trends like federal regulations putting things that are NIST derived, which in my opinion are much more mature and a better version of security compliance, as it relates to like risk mitigations or remediations. And you look at CMMC, it's gaining more respect. So if I was a company dealing with sensitive information and I was very concerned about reputation, proprietary information, protecting data, whatever it may be, I would much rather, if I see a client or a service provider saying I have CMMC, FedRAMP, and ISO and SOC 2, I would lean towards the CMMC and FedRAMP because both are NIST derived, but that gives me a lot more assurances and credibility. And I'm just noticing like the trend of the industry seems to be leaning in that direction. I mean, you see other federal agencies bringing in 171, but I now am hearing rumors about, other non-government entities trying to do something better than a SOC 2 report or ISO accreditation.
Absolutely. And, for better or for worse, CMMC is pretty stringent, which means if you do pass it or a joint surveillance assessment, you've got a really solid IT department. Even if you do the minimum required for every control, that's still, 110 different things, which are a lot more than the typical IT company or IT department does. So it's a very, very high baseline, especially for the confidentiality piece of, keeping that data protected. So, when the actual time frame came in, we're going to assess you in 2 months. Get ready. I think that, so from my perspective, so I was not on the assessment team directly. I performed as managerial oversight and quality management. We had Jill Wright from my team, who was the lead assessor, and several other people. Jeff Baldwin, I think Vince Scott was on the team as well, who are basically my most senior cybersecurity people that I have available. Very, very, very good assessors. But in the early days, it was pretty much just Jill as the lead assessor, trying to give you a heads up of what to expect, what the schedule is going to be like, what we need to see. So the first part of our process is we have a next step document, and we also have a assessment intake request document. And the intake request, of course, is a bunch of questions. Where are we going to go? What's the logistics of that like? Is there a dress code? What is your incident response procedure like? Can you give us a very high level understanding of your environment? And then the next steps document is, here's all the things you need to get ready for. We're going to have a scoping call. For the scoping call, you need data flow diagrams, network diagrams, inventories, system security plan, you need to provide them to us by this date. We're going to have a meeting. Here's the things we're going to talk about during that meeting. And then, we try and give you as much heads up on the actual assessment as possible. So, for example, I think as part of our next steps, we embed a spreadsheet that has evidence information. So it doesn't say exactly what evidence to provide because it's a little bit too early in the process, but we say here's the type of evidence that we would normally see for each practice. And can you make sure that you have something? Can you start, here's your 2-month notice, get started. Because if you don't have something, you need to figure it out soon. And then we had an FAQ at the end of just like, what do I do if somebody gets sick? What do I do if I have a logistics issue? What is this CMMC thing? Hopefully we don't need to know about that. But there was a couple questions about that. Do I really need to provide all these different things for the scoping call? Yes. Were any of those in particular, did you have any insights or, that when I saw that, I was like, what the heck, but it was useful? Or do you have any thoughts on that process?
Well, I can start off an answering from my side of the coin. You alluded to the evidence and the spreadsheet, and if I'm not mistaken, is north of 300 documents or, either documents, pictures, screen shares, whatever you call it. And to me, that was one of the most stressful parts of the project because implementation and going and configuring things is easy if you know what you're doing, right? But then going back and documenting everything you did and getting that evidence, it is overwhelming, mainly because of the amount of evidence that you have to collect. So my advice to anybody that's going to go through this is make sure you have time and you leave a lot of time for that part of the assessment, because it's one of the most stressful ones, parts of the assessment, the evidence collection.
I had a question, Amira. When you guys engaged and provided their next step documents, assessment plan, evidence plan, was that a Kieri solution or was that a DIBCAC approach?
I have to give a lot of credit to DIBCAC.
Okay.
Kieri Solutions went through a DIBCAC assessment in order for us to become an authorized C3 PAO.
Right.
And they sent us an intake request document that is very similar to the one that we sent to you. A little bit different, but very similar, which gives us that high level, here's a 5-page document that an assessor can read to understand what's going on at the company without having to look at the SSP or other network diagrams. With the next steps document, that was in-house. So we've been involved with the Cyber AB since the beginning to try and give feedback on the CMMC assessment process and the templates that were provided. And while we've been waiting for that, because at some point the Cyber AB will provide final versions of that, we decided to make a full set of templates for in-house use. So the next steps, the FAQ, the scheduling stuff, that was all made in an attempt to, help out our clients. The evidence plan is actually from DIBCAC. It's a document. It might be available on the DCMA website for anybody who wants to go look. But it's a document that they send out to all of their 800-171 DIBCAC high assessees, as well as the C3 PAOs, as a heads up, right? You need to get ready for this level of detail. And it is 320 different pieces of evidence that are expected, if not more. Some of those requirements can expand to multiple types of systems. And so it was incredibly helpful for us when we were going through CMMC Level 2 ourselves. And we wanted to share it with our assessment clients to make sure that they knew what they were getting into. It doesn't tell you what to do. It just says you need to provide all of this evidence, and kind of gives a nice structure to it.
Right. No, I asked that question because having been involved in another client's DIBCAC, I do recall the evidence plan. It was a little different formatted than the one we worked on with you guys. But all of the other documents you guys provided for planning, coordinating, triaging, FAQs, POCs was very well organized. It was like a project manager from a Lean Six Sigma guru came in and designed those things for you guys, because it clearly painted the picture of what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, how it's going to happen, and what you need to do to make it happen. Like, you need to have this ready, right? And that was like, I've been in a lot of RMF, 853 ATO, FedRAMP engagements as an ISO in the past. And sometimes it's a hit or miss, right? An agency or a component in a federal agency might have really nice defined processes. But this by far, in my opinion, was the smoothest and cleanest and most digestible set of planning documents that I've ever seen. It was almost like you guys had, a flavor of the project management, but even a designer come in and clean it up.
Thank you. Wait, so, my company's, one of our core principles is to be as transparent as possible and to try and make sure that we don't let any of our clients basically land in the dirt, right? We want to try and prevent errors before they occur. So it's all designed from that perspective, just trying to get ahead of it, and not let bad stuff happen. I want
to add a little bit on that from customer perspective. When you go into an audit and the auditors, a lot of people have the idea that the auditors are out to get you and, see where you're failing, not to let you pass. But my experience with Kieri Solutions and with Ozzie IntelliGRC, we work as a team. We all had the wanted to pass this audit, and I'm not saying that Kieri Solutions will just let us pass anything. We have to demonstrate that we were compliant, but we have some instances that we were missing something, or we have to finish something, and you gave us time to come next day and prove that we have done it, and I felt that it was a team effort, that everybody's vested to get through the audit successfully. And of course, I will tell anybody that's thinking of going through this that if you're not ready, don't even try it, because of course you're going to fail, right? But you don't have to be 100% there, because that 5% that you might find things during the audit, you have the chance to go and fix it and prove that that you're compliant.
So let's talk about that a little bit. So the DIBCAC standard, the way that DIBCAC does their assessments is it's typically Monday through Friday for most companies. And if it's a very small company, it might be a small team. If it's a very large company, it might be a very large team. But it's almost always that Monday through Friday, except for the very largest companies. So we started off, the first day was pretty much just, let's look at the documentation, let's have the assessors read through stuff. And if there's something that they can mark met based on the provided evidence, we just did, right? If we saw a vulnerability report and it looked good, we could say that's good, and we don't even need to talk about it. It's right there. And then the next the next days were interviews where Jose and Ozzie had their team in virtual meetings with our assessors to talk through stuff. And DIBCAC basically observed if we forgot to talk about something, they might ask a question. But in general, if we did a good job, DIBCAC just let us proceed, was our experience. So talking about handling issues. Sometimes there were cases, and this goes for every assessment that we do, where we say, hey, can you show us this thing? And it's not immediately available. And that's not a good or bad. That's just we're missing something for right now. And maybe the next day it's provided. And that's very, very normal. In fact, every evening we would have a check-in call where we'd go through the list of the things that we were requesting and we still needed to see. And, some of those were because there was additional questions, or maybe we saw something in the system security plan or a policy that pointed to a different source and it just wasn't anticipated previously. When there was a situation where something needed to be fixed, we talked to DIBCAC, and because there's not a whole lot written down around the Joint Surveillance Program, so we had to ask DIBCAC what to do when maybe something wasn't quite right, and maybe additional sentences needed to be written somewhere, or policy adjusted. And they said essentially there's some allowance for in the middle of the assessment if little tiny issues can be fixed and we can see that they're fixed, we can just give credit, which is great. That's definitely preferred. And then they also said that if it's a significant issue that can't be fixed in a day or two, that's still okay with the Joint Surveillance Program. And they said basically, you'll finish your assessment. It's Friday. You let people know where you're at, and then the company can come back with here's my plan for fixing this thing. Right, it's going to take me a week, and then we'll just reassess that little piece. So whatever date the company says they'll be done, DIBCAC was willing to meet again to review the evidence for that little piece, which really it only took an hour. It was very, very fast. It was very easy. And then we were able to update our assessment report and our findings to show that everything was perfect and, basically celebrate with you guys. So I thought that's a very fair way to do it. And it's way better than what some people think happens, which is you just fail and you have to start from scratch, which nobody wants that to happen. And it doesn't need to happen like that.
Yeah. I would also say the evidence plan, when you first take a look at that, yeah, it's very overwhelming, but you've got 320 AOs that you need something for, right? An artifact or more. And the past experience that I've had with audits, especially in RMF world, has been the more the merrier, but not the more just to have more. The more in the sense of, can you paint the picture to minimize how many questions need to be asked or how many clarification explanations are necessary to let the assessors understand. So finding that right balance is the trick, right? Where you're I need to provide just enough that just gives the answer, from an artifact perspective, but then also knowing that balance of not giving too much, because then it's just hard to digest and could cause even more issues, right? Potentially going off in a tangent or finding something that you didn't even know existed, or the assessor picking something and going down a rabbit hole. I will say that the approach you guys took with your daily hot washes or checkpoints at the end of the day, that was very well organized. It was very clean. So, you start in the morning, take a lunch break, pick back up in the afternoon, and then you stop like mid-afternoon. And then an hour or two later, you do a quick 30-minute hot wash. We reconnected, and Jill, the lead assessor, screen shared, here's the document. It's a nice formatted template. List the attendees, their roles. What activities did we conduct today? What is the status of the assessment? So you guys did a great job of like this many AOs out of this assessed, this many AOs met, still waiting on completing these AOs, which is tomorrow's session, right? And you guys even in your agenda broke it down by assessor for different domains and families, and had that all scheduled out throughout the week. Then the last item was, action item assignments. And these are for those small one-off situations in which there would be a situation where, like, say an assessor looks at a practice and drills into a couple of the AOs and says, hey, I don't really understand what you're trying to say here. And then we would explain something and it would kind of be like, okay, it kind of makes sense. I'm still not getting it. But one advice that I've always given people is, if you're going to use somebody to help you go through the assessment or an audit, find somebody who has a lot of audit experience, right? Because those folks, shameless plug, know how to drive the assessment, right? As in, don't let the assessors drive what you're doing. Have the right balance of like, let them ask, but then control what you're doing in response to that, right? Control what you're showing. Don't over explain, keep it to the point. Don't go on a tangent, and be very brief where necessary, but finding the right balance again, and setting expectations. So every time there was an instance where there was uncertainty from the assessor's side saying, I'm not sure how you're addressing this entirely. I kind of get it, but I can't really get the whole picture. Then I would step in and say, here's what we're doing, and here was the approach we took, and here's the solution, right? And then that was me to basically stop the conversation from going further and doing a second thing of saying, here's our strategy, right? As a service provider myself, right? I'm always trying to find the Gillette model approach, better, faster, cheaper, but I'm also trying to make it easy for my clients, right? And so from that person's perspective, even if they're, somebody who knows this stuff and they're an in-house employee, they're going to be passionate about, no, I actually designed and architected the solution. I know it's good. You just might be missing something. And so after the explanation, which was like 99% of our situations, I believe, and going back and recapping on all of the after items, action items for the next day, and seeing that, oh, we forgot to explain that, or, oh, let me show you the design document or the project plan that I used to build that solution or implement that capability or whatever it may be. Like, I already have that, but that was something that's, not a client deliverable, right? And it was just part of my back office design efforts, right? But I've got it written down that'll paint the picture for you guys. And you're like, okay, just send that over. And then, so you guys did a great job at capturing that while I'm trying to explain, and then saying, all right, well, and then you mentioned this, so go ahead and provide this by tomorrow. And we did that every day. And that way, the next day you guys looked at it and said, oh, okay, now I get it. All right, I see what you're saying. But that was like very beneficial and very nicely organized, that we were very happy. And like Jose said, it felt like a team effort. Like, you guys did such a great job at balancing, staying in the blue, avoiding conflicts of interest, while maintaining that honesty, integrity, and transparency, but also kind of silently cheering for us, right? Like, I want you guys to win, and it was really reassuring to see that. And I don't know how you guys did it, but it's like, even in the assessment sessions, like, your faces told it, right? It wasn't like, we're out to get you. It was great.
So we're going to have to wrap up in just a minute. And I will tell you, it is a pleasure to be able to assess a company who has done CMMC right. who, has taken this responsibility seriously, is not looking for shortcuts, isn't looking for ways around it. They're just getting it done, right? And there's so few companies that have done it. I think I can't get exact numbers from the Cyber AB, but I think TTC is probably the 10th or so company in the world to get that joint surveillance assessment, a voluntary assessment of 801.71, which is huge. What does that mean? That means that there's huge Fortune 100 companies, they're defense contractors, that have not proven that they are as secure as TTC is. This is really huge, right?
I would like to add something too, like as a testament to TTC and even Jose and the leadership team over there. It was very apparent from the moment we met Jose and the team at TTC that they do a great job at just getting things done and figuring it out, but being adamant and persistent about that and finding the right balance of not taking shortcuts and just doing what's necessary, no matter how hard it is. And I've dealt with a lot of SMB clients in the DIB, and Jose's one of the most motivated that I've ever met, who's like, I'm getting this done, and we're going to do it right. And I was like, that I feed off that energy, and it made me want to match that energy, right? Like, I don't see a lot of SMBs thinking like that. And it's like, it was very inspiring to see that in Jose and team. And I was just like, hey, this is awesome. I love this client, Yeah.
Well, thank you, Ozzie. And I want to add the fact that, at the beginning, you alluded to the MSP and, being part of the audit. And basically, in our case, Ozzie and his team was the one that carried the audit. He planned it, he implemented, and he presented to the auditors. I was in the background listening because, I don't have the expertise that years of experience bring that, they have, and I don't. My role that I see here is to do what needs to be done from the company to be compliant with the requirements, and pass the audit, and the ongoing effort of being compliant. And in 3 years, that it will be an easy thing because we have kept on top of that. And it's not that you do the audit and it's done. No, it's a ongoing effort. And Ozzie, made it really easy for us. And he really carried the audit. He was the one answering the questions and doing everything because I rely on his expertise that I don't have.
So guys, thank you so much. This was great. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.